Imagine waking up on the final morning of the year, only to discover that an entire family has vanished from the world. No warning, no obvious motive, and almost no explanation for what happened next. Because inside an ordinary home in a quiet neighborhood of Tokyo, police would eventually discover something that made this case almost impossible to understand. The killer had left behind fingerprints, DNA, clothing, personal belongings, and evidence that he remained inside the house for hours after the murders. Yet more than 25 years later, nobody knows who he was. This is the terrifying mystery of the Setagaya Family Murders. It was December 30th, 2000. The Miyazawa family lived in the Setagaya district of Tokyo, in a home beside what was then a large park area. Mikio Miyazawa was 44. His wife, Yasuko, was 41. Their daughter, Nina, was only 8. Their son, Rei, was 6. That evening, nothing appeared unusual. The family went about their normal routine. They had spent part of the day shopping near a local train station, then returned home, dinner, television. A quiet night at the end of the year, the kind of night that feels completely ordinary until you realize it was the last one they would ever have. According to investigators, the murders happened sometime around late December 30th into the early hours of December 31st. And then came one of the strangest parts of the entire case. The killer didn't simply leave immediately. He stayed inside the family's home for hours. When the bodies were discovered on December 31st, investigators began reconstructing what had happened. The house contained an enormous amount of evidence. The suspected killer had apparently entered through a second-floor bathroom window at the rear of the house. Near the park, investigators found indications around the window and outside the house that supported this theory. But what happened after that is where this case becomes almost surreal. The killer left behind clothing and other belongings. He also left fingerprints and biological evidence that under normal circumstances might have been enough to identify a suspect. But this wasn't a normal case. The fingerprints didn't match the databases available to investigators, and the DNA didn't immediately lead police to a known offender. The person they were searching for seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, then disappeared just as completely. But here's the detail that still makes this case so disturbing. The killer apparently used the family's computer after the murders. He also consumed food and drinks from the house. Police concluded that he remained there for a considerable period of time. In other words, the crime scene wasn't simply a place the killer passed through. He stayed inside, moving around, leaving evidence, interacting with the family's belongings. While investigators would later try to reconstruct his every movement, a person who had just committed an unimaginable crime was apparently calm enough to remain inside the house, and somehow he still got away. Contemporary reporting described evidence that the killer used the computer and remained in the house for hours. Then investigators found something even more important: the killer's blood. It wasn't just the family's biological evidence that had been recovered. Investigators had a biological sample believed to belong to the perpetrator. That meant police had something incredibly valuable, a genetic profile, something that could potentially identify him. But there was a problem. There was no matching person in the databases. So investigators knew what the killer had left behind, but not who had left it. Over the years, police developed a number of theories about the suspect. They studied his physical characteristics, his clothing, his movements, where certain items had been purchased, and even the possibility that he might have had connections outside Japan. But theories aren't the same thing as an identity, and the killer remained a ghost. Then came another strange clue. The killer had apparently worn a distinctive sweatshirt. Police investigated where similar clothing had been sold and attempted to trace the buyers. Only a limited number of the sweatshirts had been produced and sold. Yet even that trail failed to lead investigators directly to the person responsible. Think about that. A killer had left behind clothing. Police knew the type. They investigated the stores. They searched for buyers. They had fingerprints. They had DNA. And still, no arrest, no name, no confession, nothing. And that brings us to the biggest question. Why? Why did this happen to the Miyazawa family? Was it a robbery? A targeted attack? A personal motive? Something completely unrelated? Investigators have spent decades trying to answer that question, but a clear motive has never been established. The case became one of Japan's most notorious unsolved crimes, attracting enormous investigative resources and thousands of tips. Yet none produced the breakthrough police needed. And while time passed, the evidence remained. In 2025, new reporting suggested that advances in DNA analysis had raised the possibility that the killer may have been older at the time of the crime than investigators previously believed. Japanese reporting indicated that the suspect could potentially have been in his 30s when the murders occurred. If accurate, that would significantly change the picture investigators had previously considered. But even modern DNA analysis hasn't answered the central question: who was he? And where did he go? Today, the Miyazawa family's home is remembered as one of the most haunting crime scenes in modern Japanese criminal history. The location has changed. The neighborhood has changed. Technology has changed. But the mystery remains. Somewhere in the evidence collected that night is a trail leading back to the person responsible. A fingerprint, a DNA profile, a piece of clothing, a tiny detail that investigators may have overlooked decades ago. And perhaps the most unsettling thought of all, the killer didn't vanish because there was no evidence. He vanished despite leaving an extraordinary amount of it behind. More than 25 years later, the Setagaya Family Murders remain unsolved. The police are still seeking information, and the question remains: who walked into that quiet Tokyo home on the final nights of Dumil, and why did he leave almost everything behind except his identity? What do you think happened that night? Leave your theory in the comments, because sometimes the scariest mysteries aren't the ones where we have no clues. They're the ones where we have almost everything except the answer.